It's the OG fact checker here to give you a juicy tidbit of history that's verified. I'm thrilled that I've made it to episode 10. If you've watched episodes 8 and 9, then you can probably figure out who will be the focus of this episode. By the way, this is going to be a 3-part episode because there is a lot to unpack. It'll help with digesting this info, trust me. I'll admit that I feel kind of weird mentioning this first because it's a sad distinction to have. Nonetheless, I will introduce Shoshanna Johnson from El Paso, Texas, the first Black female POW to be wounded and rescued on foreign soil. My source for this episode is her semi autobiography, I'm Still Standing From Captive U.S. Soldier to Free Citizen, co written by M.L. Doyle. This Panamanian born bilingual U.S. Army brat's first name means rose in Hebrew, hence the title of this episode, The Rose from Texas. Shoshanna Johnson was born in Panama in 1973. She was 5 years old when she immigrated to America with her parents, Claude and Eunice. Coming from a primarily Spanish-speaking country, both English and Spanish were spoken in the home. Panama is a very interesting country population-wise. It's a cornucopia of culture that makes it very vibrant. Panama has 7 indigenous communities, with most of them living in protected territories all over the island. And as a country that was also part of the slave trade and dominated by Spanish conquistadors, there's a good sized population, roughly 30%, who identify as Afro descendant, according to their 2023 census. These Afro Panamanians are concentrated along the coast and in urban regions such as Panama City. There are 2 Afro Panamanian cultures in the country, Congo and Bocas Afro. The former were the first wave of slaves brought from Africa by the Spanish, and they adopted the language and religion of their captors. The latter were the second wave of slaves brought from the upper and lower Antilles of the Caribbean to build the Trans-Isthmian Railroad in the mid-1800s and as labor for banana plantations. This second wave spoke primarily English and practiced the Anglican faith. However, if you drive just 10 minutes out of Bocas Town, located in the province of Bocas del Toro, where there is a large concentration of descendants from the Antilles, you can hear a dialect called Guari Guari that mixes English, Spanish, and Patois with a splash of Ngambare, an indigenous language in the region. Johnson was no stranger to the Army life. Her father joined the Army, and the family, which included 2 American-born sisters, went through periods of separation because of her father's tours of duty. The family was stationed in Germany when Johnson was 12 years old. She and her sisters attended Department of Defense Dependent School on base. It was while they were in Germany that Johnson joined the junior ROTC for high school. So she was well prepared for the military life when she decided to join the Army at 25 years old, enlisting as a culinary specialist, which she had planned to go to school for but couldn't attend because of the high tuition. Her first assignment, Fort Carlson, Colorado, worked out well for her in unexpected ways. Her sister had also joined as an officer and received orders for the same duty station. She would need this support because Johnson found out she was going to be a mother. She gave birth to a healthy girl who she named Janelle. The father was deployed to Bosnia at the time. After 3 years at Fort Carson, Johnson had to decide if she was going to stay in or get out. She was leaning towards getting out because being a single parent in the military required too much juggling. Your first obligation is to the military, and everything else comes secondary. As the old saying goes, if the military wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you one. When she sat down with her career counselor, she was honest. If she could have her pick of duty stations, she could be persuaded to re-enlist. When asked where she wanted to go, the choice was clear: Fort Bliss, Texas. She grew up on that base thanks to her father, who had retired from the Army by this time. Her mother still worked on the base commissary. The deal was struck, and Johnson re-enlisted for another 3 years. She was transferred to the 507th Maintenance Company at Fort Bliss as one of 3 culinary arts specialists. Now, here's some background on the 507th that I didn't know. This unit is responsible for maintaining Patriot missile systems. Johnson describes it as a big truck with a long rectangular box on the back. The box portion holds 4 missiles. The entire box is tilted up at an angle with powerful hydraulic lifts so that the box of rockets is pointed up at the oncoming target. Because this system is transported on a large truck bed that would need to be towed away in case of malfunction, everyone in the unit was licensed to drive the trucks that could tow them and its ammunition. So, this combat service support unit never expected to see combat, let alone be in the thick of it. If you watched episode 9, White Bear Girl, then you know about the ambush in Nasiriyah, Iraq, and how Lori Pistawa and her roommate Jessica Lynch slammed into the back of the 5-ton Johnson was in when their Humvee was hit. Now I'll tell you what happened to Johnson after that to fill in the blanks. Johnson and 2 others from her unit are under fire from all sides. They take cover under the 5-ton they were just in. Johnson is hit in both legs. She says, I had felt a hard thud against my left ankle, then a searing burning sensation through both of my legs, but I had no idea how bad it was. My legs felt torn and wrecked, and I could feel a warm pool of blood forming at the bottom of both of my boots. Their weapons jammed, and with no way to fight back and no help arriving, the trio hiding under the truck decide to surrender, along with others in their unit who were either fighting back or took cover. Johnson is captured and attacked with boots, sandaled feet, weapon butts, hitting my arms, my head, my wounded legs. During the assault, her helmet is knocked off. The assault stops, and she is stripped of her gear for her captors to discover she is a woman. After the Iraqis strip the truck of personal belongings and army gear, they confiscate the truck, drag her because she can't stand, and throw her into the back seat of a vehicle where they strip her of her flak jacket, her chemical protection suit, her chemical suit jacket, and her uniform and her dog tags. She is molested as they search her for weapons and ammunition, which they also confiscate. Johnson is transported to a compound run by the Iraqi army where she receives semi-medical attention, going into shock twice from the loss of blood from her mangled legs. As a prisoner of war, she is interrogated through a translator. What is her name? Her training in the Army Code of Conduct dictates she must only give her name, rank, and date of birth, but she should resist giving out valuable information about her unit. Johnson is panicking because she has a little notebook with coordinate information on her person that they didn't discover when they first searched her. So the goal is to avoid future body searches until she can get rid of it, which she does. Since her given name is Hebrew, she's unsure if this will trigger them, so she gives them her nickname, Shauna, and her last name and where she's from, Texas. This interrogation is filmed and is eventually broadcasted on CNN as a confirmation of her capture. Hours later, she is reunited with other captured members of her unit, including the highest ranking member, a Sergeant Riley. One member was shot in the arm, the other shot twice but unnoticeable at first glance. At this time, Johnson is offered a painkiller that stops her from going into shock again and numbs the pain in her legs. She is told she will be transported to the hospital where her blonde friend is, Jessica Lynch. The remaining members are then loaded into an ambulance and taken to another location and left in a room together for hours as a skirmish continues outside. It was at this time that they shared information on those who they know for certain didn't make it. Chief Warrant Officer Johnny Villarreal Mata, Specialist James Keel, Specialist Jamal Addison, Private Ruben Estrella Soto, and Private First Class Howard Johnson III. Out of a unit of 15, 5 were captured and the rest were killed in action. After given a little food to eat, the unit is once again loaded into a vehicle and is taken on a look who we captured tour, stopping at various towns to get spit on and slapped as word spreads about the Americans they've captured. They finally make it to Baghdad, where she's taken to a prison, interrogated. She tells them nothing because she knows nothing, is given a change of clothes, treated for her wounds, and locked in a cell. She finds out from one of her captors that her grandmother, mistaken for her mother by the prison guard, was on CNN and she said she no like Bush. In the Geneva Conventions, Common Article 3 requires that any prisoner of war wounded or sick be provided care and to be treated humanely while in custody. And this is what they did for Johnson and other wounded members of her unit. She is treated humanely, and she receives surgery on her legs to address the gaping wounds, but she finds out later that her right ankle was broken and the Achilles tendon severed, and her left leg was broken. After surgery, which is just a temporary fix, she is returned to her prison, which winds up getting bombed by what is assumed are American forces. Because the prison is now structurally unstable from the bombing, the prisoners of war are moved multiple times. I lost count at 7. This time with 2 new additions. 2 chief warrant officers, Apache pilots, shot down the night Johnson's unit was ambushed. One of them, Chief Williams, assumes command of the POWs from Sergeant Riley as the highest ranking officer. At the 7th or 8th location, they are finally rescued on April 13th, 2003 by the Marines based on a tip on the 22nd day of their captivity. It is then that she finds out that Lynch survived and was rescued, and that Pistawa didn't make it. The Marines tell them the details of how they had been searching for them the entire time and missed them by hours at the second jail they were taken to. The goal, says the Marines, was to take the unit of prisoners to Tikrit, where Saddam and his cronies were in hiding. The plan was that we were to be used as negotiating chips in some way. The unit is then transported to Kuwait, and those who require medical attention are separated from the rest. As her vitals are being taken, a chaplain approaches her and asks if he can pray with her. She agrees. Before the chaplain even speaks, Johnson bursts into tears. Then the chaplain, then the nurses, the medics. On a stop in Germany, as Johnson makes her way back to the United States, she finds out that the Marines who rescued her were ambushed hours after they made sure that they were evacuated safely. 2 were injured, and 1 was killed. Epilogue, people. Return to regular life wasn't easy. Though Johnson was surrounded by loving and caring family members, her 22-day ordeal affected her more than she cared to admit. She was now short-tempered, depressed, and cried a lot. She has large gaps of memory of her ordeal. She fights invisible attackers in her sleep. Her aunt, a registered nurse who served in the Gulf War and was providing medical care, recognized the signs of post-traumatic stress disorder and pushed her niece to get help. In 2008, 4 years after her medical discharge, the phobias, fears, survivor's guilt, the crippling depression, it becomes too much, and she self-commits herself to a psychiatric ward for a few days. Eventually, she receives a PTSD diagnosis, which she has to fight for, and a 30% disability rating. Johnson had always planned to make the Army a career, like her father, siblings, aunts, and uncles had done. She saw no reason why she couldn't continue being a soldier. She felt she was the same person who left Fort Bliss for Iraq, but she says, I wasn't prepared for all the resentment and pettiness that made it nearly impossible to continue a life in uniform. After her convalescent leave ends, she's accused of fraud for falsely claiming family housing benefits. She is being asked to attend special events on behalf of the Army, which generates more paperwork and resentment from the people who have to do the admin work. Johnson is hobnobbing with high ranking officials and their wives as a low ranking service member, which doesn't sit right with certain people. She is accused of being jealous of Jessica Lynch when it was falsely reported that Lynch had fought bravely before her capture and was being pushed as a hero by the Army. Rumors began to circulate that it was the unit's fault that they got ambushed, that they didn't know how to work their equipment. They were stupid for getting lost, even though they were left behind. That dirty and poorly maintained equipment in a country where sand and gravel regularly jammed equipment were the reasons for their capture. According to Johnson, we had brought shame to the Army and to the unit in many of their eyes. They wanted us to disappear. They wanted us to feel ashamed for having been POWs, for having been ambushed, and for having survived. 6 months after being rescued, Johnson asks for a medical discharge, which she receives in 2004. Her unit, the 507th Maintenance Company, no longer exists. There is a reminder of this unit on a small plaque on the motor pool building. The majority of those who died during the attack worked in the motor pool. Johnson would be the first to say she's not a hero. The people who she considers heroes were the ones like the supervisor of her unit, Sergeant Walters, the blonde mistaken for Lynch, who had been executed. When he was captured, he had already been shot in the leg, shot twice in the back, stabbed twice in the abdomen, and had a dislocated shoulder. He continued to fight until he couldn't fight anymore. Another hero was Private First Class Patrick Miller, who returned fire, killing 8 men during the ambush, saving her life in the process. They, as well as others who returned to Iraq or Afghanistan on multiple tours, are the real heroes to her. There are so many people who were held prisoner in other wars, POWs who were in custody for years at a time, tortured and beaten, half starved and killed. Those are the real heroes. I love history. The more you know.